back here again. So why are we doing this? And what underpins this is going back to one of the first questions that we asked you, which is, what are your business aims? Why are you in the business that you're in? And starting to think about that is going to help you work through what data is important to you and what data is going to be useful for you in your business. So we put that list of data up, and now Nate's gone through and worked through with you some of the more complex data that's possible. But when we're starting down this path about measuring what we do and then making decisions on that basis to move ourselves forwards, it's all about understanding why we're doing this. So what our aims are in the business and what's possible. And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or you're thinking, oh wow, there's a lot of information in here and I really wouldn't know where to start, and is this actually possible and useful? Well, yes it is, as demonstrated by these guys. Has anybody here had any experience of the dairy industry? How much measurement on a daily basis do those guys take? They measure everything. I've worked for quite a lot of years in the dairy industry in the past, lived on a dairy farm for 6 years. If I'd walked up to the milking parlour and asked the dairyman at any point in time, what was your cell count today? What was your daily production? How many cows are in lactation? They know the data. They have that data at their fingertips. It speaks to the aims in their business. And it keeps them buoyant in the industry and interested and moving forward in the industry they're in. What about these guys? Horticulturalists, agronomists, cropping. Can you imagine asking anybody that's invested in the cropping industry whether or not they know what the yield was in a given paddock last year? They'd be able to tell you absolutely. You actually can't stop them telling you, is my experience. They don't even actually just know what the yield in the paddock is. They know which part of the paddock is performing best for them, which allows them to make decisions about how they use that paddock under similar conditions, under different conditions, and down the track.
Someone recently said to me at one of these, it's easy for the dairy farmers, they see their cows morning and night. For a split second I agreed with them, until I realised that that's why we're not dairy farmers. Because we don't want to see cows morning and night. So if you think they've got it easy, they haven't got it easy. They do see the cows morning and night, they haven't got it easy. All we're asking you to do is see your animals occasionally and record something on them.
So what?
And they're not every day, but they have put in a substantial investment in terms of measuring what's going on every day.
Yep.
Yes. And that's another step. And so let's not make ourselves as easy because they see them every day. They've made big steps to make sure they collect that data every day and know what's going on.
It's a concerted effort and a serious investment because they have to.
Because they understand what's important in their business. They understand absolutely what their key performance indicators are. And they understand what leverage is success in the business that they've chosen to be in. And believe me, those guys choose. 24/7, 365 days a year is a choice, or it should be. Okay, so what we're going to do, if you want to take one of these and just pass them along, we'll ask you just to start down the path of a little exercise. The sheet that we're giving you is a worksheet that we use with our clients, and it just helps you work through the process for yourself about understanding what would be useful information in your business. So as Nathan says, we've had experience of people collecting reams and reams and reams of data, and then the difficulty that they face in terms of pulling that apart and understanding what's actually going to be of use to them. So what we're asking you to do, if you have a look on the side of the sheet that I've got up on the screen and the one that's got lots and lots of narrow lines on it, up in the left-hand corner as you look at your sheets, it says breeding or enterprise objective. So we're back at the why again. So what is it that you're trying to achieve? So why would we be collecting this data? What question are you trying to answer in your business? So what do you want to measure? Okay? So the first thing to do is have a think about that. And if you can write in there for us what your breeding or enterprise objective is, And over on the right-hand side, you'll see it says objectives should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So SMART goals. Most of you will have heard about SMART goals. It's a term that gets bandied around a lot. It was probably popular back in the early 2000s in the corporate world as well. But it's actually a really key way of thinking about how we do things, because it makes you focus in and have a lot of clarity around why you're going to do what you're doing. And one of the things that's actually particularly important is how specific it is. I want to mark more lambs next year. I want my weaners to be heavier last year. No. Not specific enough. Difficult to achieve. How do you know what's heavier? What does heavier mean? So we need some really good objective measurement around that. So try and be as clear and as specific as you can. And put a time frame around it. Time frames are really important. Who in school used to do their homework on the bus on the way to school? I know I did. So deadlines are really important to us. That's the way that we work. That's the way that we think. And so if you give yourself a deadline or a time frame to work this process through, it's much, much more likely that you'll actually get to where you want to be. Okay? So as you work through that, then down the left-hand side, you can see up on the screen and on your sheets, we've got the treatment or the measurement that you're interested in. And that should relate back to this goal, this aim that you've already identified for your business. You can identify for us whether or not you're collecting it already. Have a think about if you're going to use EID for this process, what equipment do you think is going to be required to do so? So, one of the obvious ones is measuring weaning weights or measuring growth rate in lambs. So what do you need? You're going to need a set of scales. Yep, some of you already have those. Great start. And a tag in their ear, and then the capacity to link the two together. So have a think about that. Don't worry, this is not about getting this right or wrong. It's about starting thinking through this process. A really important question to ask yourself in every case: can a contractor do this for me, or is this something I would be better to do for myself? So an assumption that people make when they're going down this path is, well, I'm going to have to buy all this equipment, I'm going to have all this gear and all this access and all this new knowledge. Not the case. In a lot of cases, it's actually appropriate to make the choice for somebody else to do it on your behalf. I have an accountant for that exact reason. Because if I went down that path, there'd be all sorts of problems. I probably wouldn't be here today. And Nathan will talk you through giving an example of how contractors have been used really, really successfully in terms of capturing this data. And then on the other side of the sheet, if you turn it over, this is your time frame part. So this is your data collection plan. So this is how you map out how you're actually going to achieve the aim that you've set for your enterprise. Okay? So on this side, you've got a month down the left-hand column, and then you've got the events. So that might be a management event, like marking or weaning. It might be wet drying your ewes, where you're collecting body condition score information. The date to be collected and how you're going to do that, again, equipment required, and whether or not you can do this for yourself or whether or not it is something that you think would be useful or otherwise for you to do for yourself or to employ a contractor. Okay, so we might just give you a few minutes to fill those in. Please sing out if you would like some assistance. If anybody wants to stretch their legs and grab a cuppa, then absolutely feel free. Have a bit of a break from the two of us for a couple of minutes.
Please spend time on that breeding objective at the very top. So a breeding objective isn't I want to cut more wool. It needs to be all those things that we've got marked on there: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. So if you're a prime lamb producer, it might be I want to mark 145% lambs turning off 21 kilo carcasses by 6 months of age at a stocking rate of 14 DSE by 2020. That's a breeding objective. I want to cut more wool or I want to produce more lambs, isn't it? So spend some time on that bit.
Okay, so the reason that we gave you those sheets to have a look at and an opportunity to start working on them is not because this is something that you must complete today. It's really to give you a little bit of a pro forma or a tool for you to start thinking through this process.